Before this video begins, I'd just like to give an extra special thank you to my patron, the Beast Boss. Links to join the Patreon can be found in the description down below. This Christmas, we got Ncuti Gatwa's second Doctor Who Christmas special, Joy to the World. But was it any good? Okay, so this is my review for Joy to the World, and it's only a couple of days after the episode has actually aired. So this review is pretty much unscripted, it's just kind of off the top of my head, so if I forget anything, I might do a better, more scripted review for this episode further down the line. But I think I already know most of the things I have to say about this episode. So this is probably going to be the main review on it really, but just keep that in mind, just in case there's anything I forget to mention in this review. Okay, so this episode opens with the pre-title sequence, which was what we got in the first preview, I believe at San Diego Comic-Con earlier this year, which was a fun way to open the episode, even if I slightly clocked out at that point because I'd seen that clip many times because of breaking it down for the channel. But I like how after this pre-title sequence and after the title sequence itself, we then actually jump back a little bit and we're kind of telling the story in a kind of non-linear approach, which kind of happens a bit more throughout this episode as well, although the kind of non-linear storytelling towards the end of the episode is more to do with kind of the time travel aspect than them just choosing to tell it out of order. But it was something I kind of appreciated about this episode, at least for this first scene, although I do feel like that non-linear approach later on in the episode does slightly affect the pacing a little bit. But to be fair, I've only really fully watched this episode once at the point of this first initial review, so that might change when I watch it or rewatch it later on down the line. We're then introduced to the Time Hotel, which is a very cool and fun location for this episode for a fun little Christmas special. And having them celebrating Christmas everywhere all at once is a nice fun little Christmas twist to an episode that overall doesn't feel all that Christmassy, besides that kind of Christmas deal that they're doing at the Time Hotel and obviously the whole stuff with the star and stuff like that at the end of the episode. We're also introduced to Trev, who was a character that I really liked in this episode. I've seen Joel Fry before in Our Flag Means Death, and he's one of my favourite characters in that show, and I think he was also great in this show, or in this episode, even if he does die pretty early on in the episode. But that brief team up we get with the Doctor and Trev early on is a really fun dynamic, and it's not like he's gone for the rest of the episode after he dies. He does obviously come back as a hologram as well, which is nice. And you just feel really sad for the character because you can tell how sad he feels about letting down the Doctor on this mission when he starts to disintegrate. Similarly, you also feel really sad when the Silurian Melnak dies in this episode, who doesn't play as big of a part as I would have expected from him appearing in the preview that we had for this episode. I kind of expected him to be the main villain, but instead it turns out this villain guard briefcase that contains the starseed actually hypnotizes and mind controls the people that it attaches to, which I think was a nice fun twist that I didn't expect to be a part of the episode. However, the main issue with this approach is, although Joy is meant to be our companion throughout this episode and is basically touted as the big guest star for this episode, we don't actually get a whole lot of her in this because, number one, the Doctor has to spend a whole year somewhere without her, which I will get to. And then when we do actually get to spend time with Joy, she's being mind controlled and hypnotized by this briefcase for the most part. So unfortunately, as good as Nicola Coughlan is in this episode, the character of Joy herself does get significantly sidelined in this episode, which is really unfortunate. But obviously this isn't a problem for a lot of people, as we do also have the character of Anita, which is a character that people have been loving from what I've seen on Twitter and stuff like that. I don't think I've seen a single person say a bad thing about the character of Anita, because obviously there's this moment in like kind of the midsection or maybe towards the beginning of the episode where the Doctor has to spend a year staying and working at the normal hotel, the Sandringham Hotel in London, whilst he waits for another door of the Time Hotel to open a year later. Now obviously a lot of people, like I said, have loved the character of Anita, and while I did like the character of Anita, I don't think I enjoyed this part of the episode as much as a lot of people I've seen online did. Obviously I really liked Anita just like everybody else, but this part of the episode to me does feel like a bit of a weird detour from the rest of the episode that kind of messes with the pacing and kills the episode dead in its tracks to kind of have this fun little relationship between the Doctor and Anita take place, which, like I said, I do enjoy, but it does feel like a bit of a detour from the rest of the episode. And obviously with, like I mentioned earlier on, Joy already being sidelined in the episode because of her being mind controlled and hypnotized, her also being taken out of the episode for this whole year of the Doctor living in Sandringham Hotel doesn't really help that, unfortunately. But yeah, it does lead to this great dynamic between the Doctor and Anita, so there is some positives there, and it does ultimately make sense as we need an excuse for the Doctor to figure out this code for the briefcase and figure out what's going on with the starseed. But like I said, I just think unfortunately it is a bit of a detour from the episode itself, and and kind of messes with the pacing a little bit, in my opinion. But maybe that'll change when I rewatch this episode a bit more. And although, like I said, I do like Anita, much like everybody else I've seen, for me personally, I still actually think the emotional scenes between the Doctor and Joy, and the Doctor and Melnak the Silurian, were actually more impactful to me than the moment of the Doctor leaving Anita personally, which I think a lot of people are probably going to disagree with me on that. And then obviously in this episode we have a great moment from the Doctor, which I think Stephen Moffat had previously hinted at in the commentary for Boom, where he said we're going to get some moments of this Doctor being really mean, which I was very excited to see. At first I had thought this is going to be a moment between himself when we've got the two different Doctors, which we do kind of get a bit of him like arguing with himself and being a little bit mean, but clearly this was actually referring to the Doctor being mean to Joy to snap her out of this trance that the briefcase had her in, which I think was a great moment between the pair. Like I said, I just wish we would have got more of those two together and Joy actually being herself. But that moment between the Doctor and Joy was a great moment, and the reveal of why Joy doesn't like Christmas was really heartbreaking, and now I guess COVID is officially confirmed as part of the Doctor Who universe. Even if it's not specifically mentioned, it's clear that that's what it's about, and there's a nice little jab at the Tories in there. But with that being said, I think my main issue with this episode is, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think Villengard's plan is really specifically spelled out of what they're trying to do. Obviously they're trying to grow this star using the starseed and making use of the time hotel to have enough time to, as the Doctor says, microwave this star. But from what I can remember, I don't think there's specifically a reason given as to what they're growing this star for, whether it's a power source or a weapon. And if it is a weapon, I don't think it's specifically said what it's being used for, who it's being used to fight, anything like that. So, like I said, tell me if I'm wrong in the comments down below, but unfortunately I don't think that's mentioned in the episode, and I think that does really let it down a bit. I also think the moment after Joy has turned into this star, where we see Joy's mum looking up at the stars on Christmas Eve or Christmas Day, I can't remember exactly when it is, as she's dying and clearly knowing or thinking that that's got something to do with Joy, is a very nice scene, and a very heartwarming and heartbreaking scene, an emotional scene. But I do personally think it was a bit of a weird choice to have Joy's mum also kind of disintegrate and become a part of this star. I think it would have been nice if it was just kind of clear that Joy's mum kind of acknowledged that this had something to do with Joy and then just peacefully, you know, passed away. I think that would have been a lot more powerful, but that's just a minor nitpick I have of the episode. And obviously at the end of the episode we get this controversial moment, or, you know, a lot of the reviews or early reviews for the episode were saying that there's a controversial moment in this episode, and a lot of people had guessed that it was probably going to be something to do with the North Star and, you know, its relation to like the birth of Jesus and the nativity and stuff like that. And I thought that that was a big possibility as well, and as soon as we got the line early on in this episode where the Doctor said something about no wonder there's no room at the inn, I knew we were going to get something about that in this episode. I knew those guesses were right. But this big controversial moment in the episode is a reveal that the location where Joy became this big star was Bethlehem on the night Jesus was born. And it doesn't really go any further than that. I was expecting, with all these early reviews saying that it was such a controversial moment, that it would have gone even further than that, and, you know, we'd see kind of the Doctor trying to get to one of these inns or something like that, and maybe we'd see like baby Jesus himself or something along those lines. But really it is just a little nod, if not a bit of an obvious one, at the nativity story itself. And if it went any further than it actually did, I think maybe it could be seen as controversial or maybe a little bit cringe. But I think they went just enough with it where it's just like a little cheeky nod at that kind of Christmassy reference, and nothing in my opinion that was too controversial really. I think the only issue I really have with this moment is I think they should have left out the title card at the end where it says Bethlehem 0001, because I think we could have pieced that together ourselves and been able to tell exactly what it meant. But what did you think about Joy to the World? Like I said, if I missed anything in this review, let me know in the comments down below, and I might do a more scripted review later on. But I hope this has given you enough of my thoughts on the episode so far. A couple days after the episode has aired, at least at the time of recording, and I definitely need to give it a few more rewatches before I fully decide how I feel about the episode. Right now, I think I didn't completely love this episode. I wasn't completely blown away by it. I think at the moment I do maybe prefer it to last year's Christmas special, which also didn't blow me away all that much. But then again, that episode did introduce us to a new Doctor and a new companion, so maybe on rewatch of both of these episodes, maybe I would prefer that one more. But for some reason at the moment, I think I do personally prefer this one to the Church on Ruby Road. But if you want to know my thoughts on the Church on Ruby Road 1 year later, I'll make sure to have the video for that on screen now. Thanks for watching.